Hello and welcome to Chez Zasaa and Zasaa Zooms In. I've got with me today GK, that's Gillian, and Lola again. The two of them work well together, so for the moment we will keep them together. I don't know how long it will last, but hey. Okay, ladies, today we're talking about conflict. Resolving personal conflict. And when I say personal, I mean as in not work conflict, like personal relationships conflict. Why should we even bother? Why can't we just fight and be done?
Oh, no.
Well, be done as in go your separate ways, or be done, because you have relationships, that's just the nature of it, isn't it? You're going to kind of clash.
Well, I think I guess. And to be fair, I feel like every relationship, you see, I guess it depends on how you define conflict.
Yeah.
Because I think every relationship has its ups and downs. It's, so it's conflict. But conflict for me, I don't really do conflict. I'm not scared of confrontation, but I don't see the point in fighting. That's my thing. So even with my husband, we don't fight. We've never fought. I don't fight with him. I just fight with Jesus. And then Jesus will fight with him. Because after all, what's the point? Because I always say that you can't change anyone. You can only change yourself. So I am all for letting people know how you feel. I think you have to be very honest about this is how I feel, blah, blah, blah. So it's not like you're passive aggressive and you're now like pretending one thing when you actually mean something else. So I'm all for saying,
Stop talking to them and you don't tell them why.
You know what, Lola, you hurt me. I don't like the way you said that. I'm all for that. But I don't feel that I need to take it further than that, in the sense that just take it to Jesus. Do you understand what I mean? Because I feel sometimes when you take it further than that, you can allow emotions to get in. You can allow it to get to a point where it can come pretty much out of control and end up where it had no business going in the first place. So I think unless you are emotionally
mature,
correct, and you know that you can handle it, and no matter what comes back from them, because what if I said that to you, Lola, I don't like the way you say, well, you deserved it, you shouldn't have, I can then be like, you know what I mean? It's like, I always said this thing within our marriage, I always said that it takes two to fight. So if one person is just shouting and the other person is not responding, you are the one looking like a crazy person. Do you know what I mean? Like, it takes two to try, so you don't need to rise to the occasion. So that's kind of my thing. But I do feel that, I'm not saying don't tell people how you feel, don't deal with the situation, but I feel maybe it's the word conflict that I struggle with. I feel like...
I think a conflict is when two people can't agree, basically.
Okay,
that's what a conflict is. So you have a position that you feel strongly about, and the other person has a position that they feel strongly about, and you're trying to resolve that position to compromise.
Okay.
That's basically
actually
what conflict is.
We're doing to make it better. So whether
the
it's
process.
The process.
Yes.
Okay. All right.
So and in its basic form, I guess it's getting to know each other. So, like in a marriage, sometimes you come up against something that you didn't know before about the person.
You didn't see it coming. I never expected it.
When you have children, you suddenly realize that, your spouse believes in private education and you don't, for example.
Yeah.
Which both positions are really important, and you're talking about, the future of your child.
Yeah.
So it's not just something you can say, oh, well, do what you like sort of thing.
Yeah.
You have to, resolve that difference. And, there is an art to it. The art of negotiation.
There we go.
You have communication.
Yeah.
Communication is really important in a conflict, which I think is what most people find difficult.
They don't do, yes.
People find it difficult to express themselves accurately if emotions are involved, like if you're angry or upset or you're feeling a certain way as a woman. I know when I was married, I always felt like, well, I'm the woman, I'm going to lose this argument now. Because he's like, I'm the man, I decide.
Yeah.
So that makes me feel a certain way and affects my ability to put forward my position. My position. Yeah. So, all of those things you have to learn to negotiate within yourself. And before you negotiate or while you're negotiating with the other person, it's basically a negotiation. Resolving conflict is a negotiation, and it's recognizing that in a negotiation, not everybody gets what they want.
Yes.
I think everybody has to start from that premise.
Yeah.
Because I think what makes conflicts deteriorate into what you were describing is everybody takes their corner.
Yeah.
And one person says, I'm the right person, like I'm the man, or I'm the mother, I know what's best for my child.
Yeah.
Or, people take their corners and everybody sticks to their point of view and don't want to negotiate because they truly believe their position is the
correct,
more,
yeah.
reasonable one or the more beneficial one. So if you start from the premise that, I'm not going to get everything I want, and he's probably not going to get everything he wants, and we're going to negotiate, then it helps resolve the conflict.
Okay. Wait, Lola, go.
I just think communication is the foundation of any kind of resolution of conflict or disagreement, or if somebody hurts you. I just really feel that, particularly within our own cultural context, a lot of people don't tell you when you've done something wrong. They just change their attitude. And for me, a lot of times I'm left wondering what happened, So it's just, I think, being able to express yourself and say, that was wrong, or you hurt me, or I don't agree with that statement you made. But even if you end up getting emotional and you have a spat, if you like, about it, you should still be able to come back and maybe have another sit down, maybe when things have calmed down, and say, but it's just that, being emotionally intelligent, this is often used, this word is so, it's just, I think when some people discovered it 10 years ago, everybody now uses it, I'm like, okay. But anyway, so, but and then being self-aware as well, to just be looking for, rather that, I'm going to be honest, when I was younger, I didn't have the tools. I'm still even working on it, but I didn't have the tools to, so if you did something wrong to me, I would cut you off. There wasn't any, oh, you did this, let's talk. No, because in my mind, I've worked out that for you to have gotten from A to B, you've thought that you wanted to do this to hurt me, so you can't be a good person. So I don't want to be with you. But it's
not always that black and white.
It's not always. It's rarely ever even that black and white.
Yeah.
People do things for a variety of reasons. Most of the time, it has nothing to do with you.
Yeah.
So it's for me that journey of understanding how to approach people and say, well, I don't like that. Can we talk about it? And just or you're angry, you're emotional in the moment. Go away. A few days later, talk about it. So it's that process which I think has to be laid on the foundation of communication. And communication is not just the exchange of information. It's communicating effectively. Just making sure that they're hearing you.
And I think that based on that statement alone, oftentimes one shouldn't be doing that when one is emotionally charged.
You shouldn't.
Because you are going to come out with things, how you're feeling at that minute, which are genuine feelings, but the way you deliver it can just make the situation so much worse. So I think that it's, that thing of managing your emotions and knowing that you should be able to say, I'm not happy about this, but I can't talk about it now.
Yes.
Because I don't want to say something I will regret. To be able to have that space to say that and then come back when you have calmed down and you can actually look at it a bit more balanced.
Or if somebody comes to you and say, you've told them that, and they or they know they've hurt you, and they come and they say, I'm sorry, but you say, I'm actually not ready to deal with this. Can we, if I can imagine saying that to somebody, that would probably escalate the rift more, rather than understand that actually it's okay to take your time to process your emotions to the point where you're ready to accept an apology and have a sit down with somebody. So, it's all of these different, angles of working through the conflict that I think of when I think about resolving conflict, and being able to understand that if you say I am sorry, I actually may not be ready to accept
I think that there's a tendency to think that when you forgive someone, that so basically somebody forgives you and you almost feel like that means that they don't have to process to go through I can forgive you, but I still need time to come back to where, just because I've forgiven you doesn't mean that we're okay right this minute.
Yes,
Do you know what I mean?
exactly.
You have to allow me the time to. And I think there's a tendency that when you say, okay, I've said I'm sorry, therefore
What more
I
do you
expect
want?
you to.
Yeah.
And I don't know if you saw the one we did on Should You Always Forgive and Forget, that I did with Wonu and Kemi. Oh, it was wild. That I did with Wonu and Kemi, and basically saying that yes, forgive, but the fact that I've forgiven you doesn't mean that you should, because Kemi's stance, I don't know if you've met Kemi. Kemi's
I love
stance,
her, by the
love
way.
her.
Yeah.
Kemi's stance is that why do they always put it on the Christians to be the ones to be forgiving? Because you have decided to behave badly and you have decided to, you know what I mean? Why should I be the one just because I'm Christian that I have to, no, I too can be upset for it, you know what I mean? So she's very much like on, so we had a whole big debate about that. But I do think that there is an element of, you kind of think, well, I've said sorry, so, that should end it. And it doesn't, because every feeling is valid. And you can't say, what I'm sorry, mate. Like, oh, my sister used to do so when we were growing up. Drove me mad, love. So what she'll do is, she'll do something to upset me. Like, have a screaming rage, whatever. And then she's done. Meanwhile, I'm like, no, we're not done. So, like, she's coming trying to just continue where we left off. And I'm thinking, I've not even dealt with what you just said to me. But there are people like, that's a character thing as well, where some people, it's like, the moment I get it off my chest, we're good. Whereas there are other people that are like, I need to work through this, I need to, you know what I mean? And so you have to understand the type of person you're dealing with as well.
That's exactly it. It's exactly, because like resolving conflict is not just about you. It's more about the other person. And that's where forgiving comes in. And that's where I think, our Christian identity comes in, and our understanding who we are comes in. Because a lot of the time, like I said, people take their corners. So a lot of the time, if a conflict is about you and you're thinking about what this person did to me and how it makes me feel and what I want to get out of this conflict resolution, it's going to be a more difficult process. I'm not saying it's not going to be resolved, but it'll be more difficult. But the easiest way to resolve a conflict, Lola and I trained as lawyers. So as a lawyer, you do negotiation, and I trained as a barrister, you also present a case and you try and look at what the other side are saying in order to win your case, or in order to get for your client what they want. So you have to look at the other side. What are they saying? Where are they coming from? Is the law on their side? You always have to look at the other side if you're a good lawyer. So from that, I learned that you have to look, and from Jesus, I learned that you have to look at the other person. How is this person feeling? How did what I say make that person feel? Because I'm very much like your sister. We have a screaming match. I say what I need to say. Everybody's whatever, because that's how I grew up. We had Italian type thing. Everybody waving their arms and screaming and everything, and then boom, and it's over. And the next day in my family, we were never like, oh, you offended me, I'm not talking to you. There was never that.
I think that's such a good.
So because my mum would not tolerate it, she just says, oh, it's not Christian. So we resolve everything right there, and that's it. But then I had some close friends who would be like, no, you can't do that to me. You can't just dump it on me and then go off and you're fine and I'm left with all this stuff. And I thought, oh, that's true. Because I'm thinking about how what I said or what I did made the other person feel. So you have to think about, in a conflict resolution, what's the other person's perspective and how does that help resolve
but do
the
you
situation.
think that you can do that when you are still, because you see, I totally agree with that, but sometimes I feel like when you are in the thick of it, and that's why I always feel like you don't necessarily have to solve it there and then. Because I feel like when you're in the thick of it, you don't have that ability or that clearness of mind to think about the other person, because at that point you are just feeling so hurt. So it's all about me, like you said. You can't step out of yourself to take it from their point of view and see what they are feeling. Do you get what I mean?
Well, it depends on the relationship. So in an intimate relationship, like if it's with your husband or your wife or your child, for example, you know them very well. So you can guess or imagine why they feel the way they feel, or how it makes them feel, or something like that in the moment, and make a decision in that moment. So, for example, like you said, if you can't resolve it in that moment, then you just step back and say, oh, okay, we're not going to resolve it now. Let me stop talking. Or let me, remove myself from the... Or you can just go make a cup of tea, come back and say... I do this with my son quite a lot, where I apologise for my behaviour, even though he's done something wrong and he's my son, African mother, you're my child, I brought you in this world, I take you out, sort of thing. But you think he doesn't understand, and he's not going to understand it because he's, young and, a man or a boy. And so I think, okay, I'm going to step back and take responsibility for what I did in this conflict so that we can then step back and revisit the situation. Yeah. And sometimes that resolves the situation where I would say, okay, I'm sorry, I was so upset. Because I was upset, maybe he does something and I'm really upset about what he did and I'm angry. As you say, I try not to be emotional, especially with your child. You want to be like, balanced and in a temperate position. But sometimes I lose my temper, my face is all squeezed up. And he's like, oh my God, my mom is mad. And stuff like that. So then I apologize for being angry and say, okay, I'm sorry I'm angry and everything like that. And that would just calm him down. Sometimes he will explain immediately and sometimes he will go off and I'll go off and then we'll talk about it later.
But this goes back to what you're saying about communication. I think communication is key in everything.
Yeah, but it's not as easy.
It's not easy. Yes.
That's the thing. I think that's what people find most difficult about relationships.
And I think also sometimes I don't think we're necessarily taught to communicate.
We're definitely...
do you know what I mean?
Definitely not. I mean, I think... sometimes you're taught, like in your family, from what you've described, there was clearly that, environment where you were able to express yourself.
Yes.
And that's
that
not necessarily so everywhere. Yeah. Speaking of children, I used to shout a lot. No. I mean, I'm sure... my neighbors have recorded. They want to expose me, But it's from a place of, look, I've told you 5 times. Yeah. So now the only thing you're gonna hear is me shouting. But my kids couldn't handle that. They're like, why do you have to shout? But I couldn't understand why. If I shout the first time, this was my explanation. That if I shout the first time, you can have a go, or you can correct me. But if I've told you 4 to 5 times, I think I now have the right to shout. But I began to understand how it made them feel.
Yeah.
And so it was a conscious decision for me not to shout at them anymore, which I was not thinking, oh gosh, hello, well done you have not shouted in many a year, but it was just that now, my parents didn't really shout. I don't, in fact now I kind of, that's like, if somebody raises their voice, I'm like, please, nobody has ever raised their voice to me in my life, so you can't do that. So, but if I can imagine something else that my parents did, I don't think I would have been able to have that conversation with them about, please don't talk to me like, or don't, we just didn't have that. So it's just that communication, and that was a conflict for us because it was a big, they were like, why do you have to shout? You actually don't need that. And I didn't understand. But we talked through it. It took a while. It wasn't immediate. Yeah. And at one point, I was like, okay, every time I shout, I put a pound in this. And then, then we did. I mean, we kind of went.
I raise my voice when I'm upset. It just comes as when I'm upset or agitated or stressed. I raise my voice. But again, like you, I tried not to. But I had an advantage about the parenting thing because I had a conversation with my mum. Again, it's about this communication thing. My dad was the one who encouraged it because my dad is an intellectual or was an intellectual. And so he parented in an intellectual way, which is that he would analyze things intellectually. So he would say things like, oh, when you've done something wrong, he'll be like, oh, so go away, think about what you did and come and tell me.
What my mom.
Right.
Oh my God. Why don't you just shout at me already? you know,
Yeah.
and come back and tell me why what you did was totally unacceptable. You're like, oh my goodness, you know.
Yeah.
So part of that intellectual parenting was a lot of discussion, talking, and encouraging us to express ourselves, because I think he thought, I'm not going to know how they feel about something unless they tell me.
Yeah.
And so I brought that with my, that was our relationship. So when my son turned into a teenager, I was like, I said to my mum, I don't know what to do. I tell him to do something now and he doesn't do it, or I have to say. She was like, oh, you just have to say it like 5 or 6 times. That was the same thing with you. So because she told me that, I knew he wasn't going to do it the first time. Because she was like, you just have to keep saying it. I was like, keep saying it? That's like hard work. She was like, yeah, what do you think you were? You were hard work. So you just have to keep. And so I thought, oh, okay. It means 5 or 6. So I would just keep saying it. And my son had this habit of, not he had a habit, it did come true where you had to tell him something 5 or 6 times. There was a time he wanted a BlackBerry, and he kept asking me. I think he asked me for a whole year every month. And every time he would come and ask me, I would give him the same answer, because, you know, my mom was like, yeah, it's not going to happen overnight. You know, because that's how kids are. They were like, oh, I'll try again. I'll try again. You did exactly the same thing. So I thought, oh, that's very helpful. So it's so that's what you say about communication.
Yeah.
And you know that when you're talking about communication, it's different forms of communication, because the way you communicate with your son is not the same way you communicate with your friend. It's not the same way you communicate with your spouse. So it's always learning to communicate with people with a view to resolving a conflict out of love. You know, we've talked about that before. That, you know, I love this. I want to show them love. I want to show them, you know, God's love. And in order to do that, I need to communicate. But as we've said, it's not easier said than done.
It's hard for me to tell people how I you know, it's something I'm learning, and I watch people do it, and then I'm like, okay, you know, you didn't die when you did it, or they didn't cut off your head, you know, kind of thing. Because for me, at the base of it is, I don't want to make somebody feel uncomfortable. You know, or I don't want you to think I'm overreacting. You know.
But you see, it's interesting, because I think I get that, but I think that also we don't have to make them feel uncomfortable by telling them in the way that we tell them. Do you understand what I'm saying? So it's like, there's a way you will know, especially if you have a relationship with the person, there's a way you will know how to deliver it that may surprise them, but it shouldn't make them feel uncomfortable. Do you understand what I mean? You could do it in ways that, and I think, but I understand what you mean, because generally, if somebody comes at you with something like that, you probably would feel, so you're probably projecting how you would feel as well, to a certain extent, on how, you know what I mean? But I think
also it's based on experience.
No, of course.
You know,
and I think people are not used to, especially in our culture, people are not used to people communicating with them that way as well. So it comes as a shock to them too. You know what I mean? So you almost have to sandwich it, you know, prepare, because they're not used to, because generally it's either we just shout, or we stop talking.
Because with a non-Nigerian, with my non-Nigerian friends and colleagues in some cases, I actually have no problem, because I know that they're not taking it personal, and they're not thinking I'm attacking them, and we kind of move on. But that really happens to me only within the Nigerian
but that's what I'm saying, because they too, like you know, the same way we were not taught to communicate. So this whole communication thing is not in the way, I don't want to make it seem bad, but the way that healthy communication is not what we're used to. So when you start doing healthy communication, it becomes quite threatening. Like, what do you mean by that? And then you now become defensive. Then it now becomes an attack. Then you now become, you know, and the whole thing just spirals out. So I get what you're saying. But
or to speak with them within their cultural context. So, for example, because I'm British born, brought up, my cultural reference is British. But I deal with a lot of Nigerians, and I understand their context. When you're talking to somebody who's Nigerian, who's older than you, they expect you to conduct yourself in a certain way. And I'm not going to disrespect that just because I don't recognize it as a British person. It's like, I don't care if you're older than me. But I understand that in their context, they think it's important. And so I will communicate with them in that context.
Yeah.
And call them mommy if that's what they...
But then in
Do you
that
see
context,
what I mean?
specifically the Yoruba culture,
Yeah.
an elder never lies, right?
Yeah.
That is actually a phrase.
Yeah.
So when the elder lies,
Yeah.
what goes on then?
So you ignore the lie and you focus on the thing
The
that
way it
they...
made you feel.
Yeah.
Well, I have to give you an example. My grandma.
Yeah, very, very quick.
I told her she lied, and I told her I wasn't apologizing to
yeah.
her. But from that day on, she
She stopped
respected
it,
me.
yeah. But that's what I'm saying. I think that's what tends to happen. But people are too scared to make that thing. And of course, with someone like your grandmother, because she's so close, you're safe. But you could do it with someone where it's not a safe space, and then they may not. Okay.
A lot more to go.
I don't even know what to say. It's
Part
ridiculous. So we were talking about resolving personal conflicts. We've thrown a few things out there. We hope that you will start to have your own conversations. But let us know, how do you resolve personal conflicts? Do you just scream and walk off? Or do you actually like sit down, have a discussion? Do you let your emotions get the better of you, or do you control them? I mean, what do you do? And what is the best thing to do? What's the conclusion? Because, you know, we're talking as Christians, and in the end, we want it to be a positive thing for everybody. So that's where we're coming from, because I'm sure you're thinking just fight and go. Anyway, follow us on YouTube, and don't forget to rock your own gorgeous.